Hiya. So I thought I'd make a video sort of essay of my work explained rather than writing it. So what the initial thing I wanted to make was an animation about a folk story. In the folk story, it's about a couple, Sawney Bean and Agnes, and in the story, they're the baddies. They're definitely the baddies. They attack lonely travelers, and they would take them back to their cave and eat them. And they did this for a long time. And in the story, they had children, and their children had children with each other, and they'd all be this cannibal tribe of this Scottish clan living in a cave. And yeah, when I first heard the story, it kind of captured my imagination, having like a bit of a interest in horror and things. And this is meant to be the original story of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and The Hills Have Eyes. And things like that. Yeah, and I found it really fascinating. And then the more I looked into it, the more interesting it was. And yeah, so I sort of investigated this story more and found out that it wasn't. Of course, it never happened. It was very, very unlikely to even have been based on anyone, and it was anti-Scottish propaganda. And there's so many holes in the story; it wouldn't make sense. Like they attack a couple, I think they kill her, but he gets away because it just so happens that 20 people were just passing because they'd left a fair. And this is set in Galloway, and Galloway now is very sparsely populated. So even back then, it was the likelihood of 20 people just passing is sort of ridiculous. And also, there was never a fair in Galloway around that time. It's meant to be set between the 14th and 16th century, but it's never specific exactly when. And guy got attacked. They all go to. That's very patriotic sort of story. They go to the king, and the king and his people, they go off and they find Sawney Bean, and they torture him and his family, and Agnes, and they mutilate the men and have all the women watch, and then they burn the women, and it was sort of brutal. And it was interesting because the latter part of the story I find quite scary. Executions I find frightening, especially when they have sort of a government state or moral hierarchy behind them that might be perhaps a bit deluded. And then I looked into, yeah, the sort of, as it seems my process. I really enjoyed the research part of things, and it gives me more and more ideas. And there's a professor, Ronald Hutton, who's an expert in witchcraft, the history of witchcraft, and actually internationally, but mainly I've been watching videos in Britain and Scotland. Oh yes, and sorry, and I'd meant to say Agnes was meant to have been a witch. Yeah, so I was looking into his work, and like really fascinating. And Scotland was the worst place to be during the sort of witch hunting times, or one of the worst places. With a population a fifth of England, they executed 5 times the amount of witches. And a lot of what I found quite scary was a lot of the time it would be done by it would be your neighbours, and they'd torture a confession out of you, and then you'd be taken off to be executed. And yeah, the themes I find scary in the story. I think a lot of it is sort of the idea of like misinformation and perhaps being in the wrong place at the wrong time and being the wrong sort of person. And there were ideas in the story I wanted to look into, and I'd sort of liked the idea of. I initially liked the idea of Sawney and Agnes perhaps being some sort of anti-government military or anti-monarchy paramilitary, but I sort of kept things a lot more simple. Yeah, and in doing the research, all the things, I ended up getting a bit sort of overwhelmed by ideas a little bit, and I had to calm it down. But yeah, there was sort of the ideas of, I didn't realise till doing the research how much of a problem witch hunting is sort of internationally in sub-Saharan countries, and I find the satanic panic very interesting as well, and I sort of wanted to look into that and mass hysteria and what were the causes of the situation that led to this in the first place, and sort of learning more about there was a change of environmental change that meant growing food was very, very difficult for a couple of 100 years. On top of that, you had the plague, and people were not in a good way. And the main thing was sort of what's the modern equivalent of witch hunting today. It's still a huge amount of sort of misinformation and demonization of certain types of people. So one of my initial ideas was I wanted to do an animation. I like the idea of sort of having them on putting them back on a pedestal. I didn't want to do it in a tacky way, so I was sort of considering merchandise and creating a Sawney and Agnes fan club or appreciation society. But then I thought that was a little bit too close to what I've done in the past. And I remember the story Jonathan was saying about the motorbike and sort of not repeating what you've done for your A levels. And I feel like that doing merchandise would be that was my equivalent of A levels. Another sort of theme in the story I wanted to write as well. Within witchcraft in Scotland, there was a Scottish version of the voodoo doll, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Corp Crira, translates as clay body. And that sort of caught my attention, and I like this idea of this odd couple who are very creative, creating all these different bodies, and then that being a replacement perhaps for their children, and then getting sort of demonized for creating these little creatures. The way these characters play with dolls, it felt a little bit almost like autobiographical. So even making the animation, I feel like it's the same thing as playing with dolls, but perhaps using a bit more sophisticated technology. And I thought that was quite a funny thought. I was on early ideas. I was quite inspired by Jean-Michel Wutu, who's a Congolese animator who does Congolese folk story animations. I liked the style of it as well, and it sort of reminded me of Ivor the Engine, which was quite a big thing when I was a kid. We had the videotape, and I think I'm quite influenced by that. When I was getting it all together in the first place, sort of writing a script, the initial idea was to have a voiceover narrating everything. It felt a bit tacky, or not tacky, but I've always admired people who can tell a story, like show it and not tell. And I thought, considering my last work was, it was almost like one static camera almost in a room, heavily audio based. I thought it would be good to have a go at doing the opposite, where it was all sort of showing and lots of scenes and locations, and sort of being able to tell a story, which I don't know whether I did or not, but that was the challenge with it all. I was going through my liked videos in YouTube, and one that came up I hadn't seen for a long time that was a really big inspiration was there was a teaser trailer for Candyman reboot in 2020, and it was a sort of story told with no words at all, and it was all done with shadow puppets. And like, even though it leaves loads of question marks, well, it is a trailer, it sort of like really, really efficiently told a story, and that was something I found quite inspiring. My first attempt at making the animation, I really didn't like it at all. I think I'd been watching it for so long and editing it for so long, I didn't realise what it looked like anymore. And so I left it for a day and went back to it, and it was really bad, really bad. And the main bit I had a problem was it feels like I wanted to do I sort of crowbarred a bit in there with Tommy Robinson and people waving flags and like having that be parallel to superstitious people of the past waving crosses and attacking people. It was just it was really obvious and sort of a bit vulgar, lacked subtlety, and I really didn't like it, and it was like very low hanging fruit as well. And as much as I'd love to lay into Tommy Robinson, it didn't feel like a very good way of doing it. One of these many ideas I had for it, I wanted to sort of say that in the with the title and description of the animation, rather than having it too blatant. I decided to have it as a triptych, and the first screen playing the animation sort of straight out, the second screen sort of playing metaphorical themes of the animation, so it's almost like the story without the characters, and on the third screen was sort of display of the characters, but lacking the story and themes, and sort of just floating around in space. And it's almost like sort of showing the formula of the animation, where you've got like the themes and emotions in one video, but not making any sense because it hasn't got the characters. And then in the third video, the characters, but not making any sense because there's no story. And seeing how they all play together, I did have them all sync up for one scene, because I thought that made the scene more powerful. The appeal of having three screens really grabbed me as well, because I really liked looking at the story in different layers. Lars von Trier would do a thing where he'd made Dogville, and for that he decided not to have any sets at all, and like seeing what story you can tell missing a key item I thought would be really interesting. And yeah, layers seems to be how my brain works as well. I really enjoy layering things up in my sketchbooks. A lot of the time I'll have an idea and then go over the top of it with tracing paper or and sort of pile it upwards. I find that really appealing. And the way Photoshop and Premiere Pro works really fits my brain. Yeah, and it was quite a multimedia project. I used cyanotypes, lino cut, watercolors, inks, plasticine, collage, and video collage. And I enjoyed the sort of multimedia look of it, and it kept me, it sort of kept my attention as well. And it was really nice, sort of, when I felt like I was spending too much time on the computer, being able to like play around with some inks or something like that, and having a break from it. And it was a really good balance, and I really liked the way the sort of digital and analog kind of worked together. And it's an aesthetic I really enjoy. My computer processors was Photoshop, Premiere Pro, which I feel like with both of them I'm getting okay at. I don't know if I'd say fluent, but like I can definitely do okay with them at this point. And Adobe Animate I'm getting better at, but I don't think I'm great at it. And for the first time I picked up After Effects and Audition. Oh, and Dragon Frame as well. There was a section in the animation where it was hand drawn and photographed frame by frame, and that was the first time I did that, and I found it really satisfying. Also, there was a thing where I felt like I had to consider my audience, and I sort of toned down themes I might have made a little bit more extreme otherwise, but I felt like it would be nice to have a go at catering for a sort of younger audience. Oh yeah, so Sawney is based on I think it's called the Dance of Death, which is a mural in this Berlin church, and yeah, I've always just found it so like otherworldly, and yeah, I feel like someone who would be accused of witchcraft, perhaps in the olden days, might be a little odd or otherworldly and well different, strange. Yeah, so I think I sort of managed to portray him like that. And Agnes was based a lot on old woodcuts of people drinking with the devil and stuff like that. I quite like the aesthetic, and I liked the idea of an animated woodcut. So I find the whole process of storytelling really interesting, and the idea of like who might be telling the story and why, and whether it's propaganda or is there an agenda behind it. I find that a interesting subject, and yeah, the responsibility with storytelling as well. If once storytelling becomes dangerous, when should it stop? And with my work, there seems to be a bit of a theme of sort of taking apart stories that have already been made and established, and taking them apart and putting them back together again. And I find that quite fun. I think for next time round, one thing I'd consider would be more time on the characters. I think it needed a bit more of a build-up. And perhaps more of a beginning and a middle. I think 5 minutes would have been a lot better for this project, and keeping that in mind for the next one.